Welcome back again to the main session. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whichever part of the world you are joining today from. Evaluation or feedback is very important for any person, whether you are an individual contributor or working with a team lead, or a manager. How effective your feedback is, that effective is your team collaboration. I have with me DTM Abhijeet, who is going to lead this session and going to help us how we can do effective evaluation for speeches and also take it back to our personal professional life, which will help us a lot to lead group of people or to deal with lot of people. DTM Abhijeet works for a corporate company and he's in a senior vice president position right now. He's in Toastmaster for now about 3+ years. He's been serving in different roles. Right now, he's the club co-director for District 101. Let's invite DTM Abhijeet to the virtual lecture to
Thank you
help
so
us
much.
on the evaluation. Over to you, DTM Abhijeet.
Thank you so much, Raghu. I'll make just one correction. I'm a program manager at NVIDIA. So what are evaluations? With evaluations, you can change people's lives. You can make a difference. One thing I want to tell you a secret. I learned how to do evaluations in Toastmasters, but I'm still learning how to do evaluations with my family and my friends because sometimes I'm too direct and that does not work. So it's a process. It takes time. Today I'm going to share a lot of things, but I want to share 3 things which are not there in my presentation. I want you to remember these 3 things. Evaluations involve critical thinking and listening. Critical thinking and listening, because you're observing and you're picking up things that are important. The second thing is don't get bogged down into the details. And the third and the most important thing, bring your heart. If you can bring your heart, you can take your evaluations to the next level. Let's get started. Let me share my presentation. I'm going to give you a copy of it. This is going to be an interactive presentation, so ask me any questions at any moment you have. Before I get started, can you take the drag bar in the middle so that you can see me on the half of the side and my presentation on the other half? Evaluate with empathy. I'm going to share a story with you. 1.5 years ago, I was evaluating a speaker. I realized that his speech was not meeting the objectives because the speech was for 8 to 10 minutes and he gave a speech for just 6 minutes. And I knew he was not very well prepared, but I was afraid to tell him. Then I talked to my mentor and he said, you need to share those things. If you want to help that person, you need to share those things. And he taught me some framework. Today, I'm going to share that framework with you. Here is the agenda. First, we'll start with why do we need to evaluate. Then we'll go into the radical candor compass or compassionate candor compass. This is based on a book by Kim Scott. Kim Scott shares how to give feedback at workplace. I'll go into the details of the magic of I statements, the system and structure, which I've learned from various people. What is the ideal feedback? Then we'll go into what is superlatives and rambling. And I'm going to add one more thing I have added is regurgitation. We never regurgitate the speech, which is already given. How to practice and what to evaluate. And finally, questions. But this is going to be an interactive session. Ask me any moment if you don't understand anything. Let's get started. Jaymol, why do we need to evaluate?
Evaluating helps because by evaluating, you are helping the speaker basically by evaluating, you are sharing with the speaker what that speaker did well and what he could improve on. And this will motivate the speaker to speak more. And so it's basically encouraging the speaker to speak more, and then the speaker be able to be able to correct some things and speak.
Very true. Thank you, Jaymol. Cherry, anything else? Anything different?
Similar evaluation help determine what works very well and what could be improved in the speaker's speech. And it also provide a systematic method to study what we can improve on.
Very true, very true. Wendy, anything else from your side?
I think everybody has blind spots. Maybe they don't realize what they don't do well. And as bystander, I realized the feedback was often on the targets that you should improve. So that could dramatically help the speaker make progress, faster progress.
Very true, very true. Thank you, Wendy. I want to share some more things. Evaluation is a way we can learn something from the speaker. Sometimes there are things they are doing which we don't do. And those things we can emulate. Those things we can emulate. Remember that. The second thing is, sometimes when I'm a speaker, I don't know what things I am doing effectively. Like I gave a speech like 2 or 4 weeks ago. It was a rant. Okay. It was a 4-minute rant. And I didn't know what I was doing. But after it was done, people still remember my rant and was like, okay, why did it connect with it? I'm still clueless. Why did it connect with it? So as a speaker, if you evaluate in such a way that it tells me what I did well. So remember, sometimes speaker has no idea what are they doing well. So that is another reason. In my presentation, there are a lot of things, but here are 3 things to remember. The first one is compassionate candor. Kim Scott used to use radical candor in the starting, but now she moved to compassionate candor. We need to use compassionate candor. I'll go into details about that. Then we'll talk about the magic of I statements. And finally, an ideal feedback is the feedback which is very specific and also has the example attached to it. Remember, you need to give the why. Why did it work for you? So I want you to remember these 3 things. I told you 3 things earlier. These 3 things will make your evaluation complete. Let's get started. What is radical candor? Radical candor is the XY axis. Okay, if you see the Y axis, you care personally on the top side and you don't care on the other side. On the x-axis, on one side you have silence and on the other side you challenge them directly. Susan, which quadrant should we be in?
You should be in the upper right-hand column where you can challenge directly and care deeply.
Perfect. Very, very true, Susan. Let's go into each and every quadrant. I'm not going to talk about the manipulative insincerity because I don't see that in Toastmasters, but ruinous empathy. When I started my evaluation journey, I was doing ruinous empathy. The story I told you about, my fellow Toastmaster, he was not prepared and his speech was not meeting his objective. I kept silence and never told him about it. Because I cared personally about him. I didn't want it to offend him in any way. So this is the second worst quadrant to be in, ruinous empathy. The next quadrant, obnoxious aggression. I have seen myself, like sometimes if I'm not centered, I give feedback, which is so direct that it can piss people off. Though this is the second best, it is not very good because what I've seen with myself is someone is giving me that kind of feedback, I become so defensive that I don't take that feedback. So obnoxious aggression, try to avoid that. And finally, ruinous empathy. Here, we give a very empathetic feedback, but we also challenge them. It's all about how the words you use. Whenever I'm giving a feedback, I learned I will never use the word improvement. I only talk about, here are the things you did effectively, and here are the things you could do to make your speech more effective. Improvement and effective. See how the words are. Play with words because the words can be very effective. So why we need to be in radical candor? Here is the reason. If you are in the radical candor, you can have a profound growth in the speaker. And they can grow, they can change. But if you are in obnoxious aggression, there is little change. But as I said before, it becomes different. I became defensive when someone is giving me that kind of a feedback. And ruinous empathy, there is no change. So that is the reason we need to be in the radical candor compass or compassionate candor. So what to evaluate? If you don't like the speaker, keep that aside. We are not evaluating him as a person. We are evaluating the speech delivery, the speech content, and the impact of the speech. The impact of the speech is very important because whenever you hear a speech, every speech is going to impact you. Any questions so far?
Can you be explicit about the impact of speech?
Impact of the speech. Okay. What does the speech make you think? How is the message? Is that message really like you want to follow that message? What is happening with the message? Like sometimes, I'll give you an example. Yesterday, Carol gave a speech. She talked about Aristotle's principle of happiness. Today, I got up at 4:30 a.m. and I was reading about what she was talking about. That speech made an impact on me. I'm going to carry that Aristotle's principles of happiness with me. So that is the impact she has made for me. So remember, the speeches will impact you and you want to share that impact. Like I want to emulate, or I want to follow that, what she talked about. That is the impact she had on me. Does that make sense?
Yes. So even, sorry, I'm just tweaking my question. So even as a speech writer, I should be thinking that what impact, it should be a criteria for me while writing a speech.
So one thing I'll tell you, my mentors have taught me is you share that message with the audience which you want to hear. Okay? So you want to share a message which you are passionate about. Remember, what impacts you also impacts others.
But while evaluating, impact is not sudden. If I'm listening to a speech, I may have that impact. I may take the speech, with me, but
Yes.
it may take some time. So impact doesn't come. It can be sudden. It cannot be sudden. So how do I?
You will come to know your feelings. I immediately feel something after the speech I heard. Any speech I heard, I'll feel what am I feeling? Am I feeling like, or am I really engaging in, or taking in? It's like makes sense. So those are the feelings I'm talking about.
Thank you.
You will have the reaction. Immediately once you hear a speech, you have that reaction and you have to share that reaction with your speaker because they need to know how you felt after you heard it. Any other questions? Let's move on. The magic of I statements. I was reading this book, Autobiography of an Yogi. And there was this one statement which kind of imprinted on my brain. In that book, it said, observations, not judgment, is the highest form of human intelligence. Observation, not judgment, is the highest form of human intelligence. So when we are doing the evaluation, we are just observing. So when we are observing, what kind of words do we use? So these are the words we use. I felt, I heard, I saw. You never use, you did this in the speech. When I sometimes hearing an evaluation, I hear you. No, no, no. You start your statement, I felt, I heard, I saw. So always remember, use these three statements for your observations. I'm going to share more of the I statements. So as I told you, simple observations. I felt, I saw, I noticed. But if someone is doing something really well, like I have my friend, Lindy McLean, whenever she speaks, her vocal variety is so good. Like it immediately transports me to that scene she is talking about. So I noticed that. I really love that about her speech. So I'm doing a positive reinforcement. And if there is something you are confused by, just share that. Like sometimes I heard a speech, but I could not follow the plot. I told them I was confused by the plot. I wanted more information where this is going. So you can share that information. And suppose if you want them to do more things in the speech, you can use the words like, I wanted to see if you can add more to the conclusion. Like I gave a speech last Wednesday and Declan was my evaluator. He immediately said that I need to work on the conclusion. The way he said is, I want to see how you elaborate on the conclusion. So these are the words which we can use. These are the various kinds of I statements. I'm going to give you the slide deck, so you will have the slide deck with you. So these are the I statements I encourage you to use when you're doing an evaluation. What is the system? Remember, when someone is giving a speech, we have to listen and we also have to take notes. And our notes taking improves as we practice and practice and practice. But we can have some symbols which we can use to take quick notes. So today I'm going to share some of the notes with you or some of the symbols with you. Mostly what happens is someone is giving a speech. I take my pad and I just divide into two sides. One side, the things speaker did effectively, and on the other side, the things speaker could do to make the speech more effective. So I just sometimes use the symbols like plus on the effective side and dash on the other side. If I'm confused by something, I use a question mark. And if something is very inspirational or something I really loved, I will use a star mark. The reason I use the star mark is I'll tell you in the next few slides. One thing I encourage you to take notes in less than 6 words. You need to take the notes in tweetable size, not too long. Because if you take very long notes, the speaker has moved ahead and you have missed a lot of things he has said. So let's go into the structure. Before moving into the structure, any questions so far? The structure, remember, evaluation is also a speech. It has 3 parts: introduction, body, and summary. In introduction, always share how did the speech affected me in just 2 lines, or what did it remind me of? 20 seconds max, 2 lines. I directly start, how did that speech impacted me? Like, I'll give you an example. One of my fellow Toastmaster, Devin, gave a speech. He was talking about hiking and it was getting cold that night. And they had to make a choice. Do they camp in the cold or go back to their car, which was like 4 or 5 hours away? They decided to hike and go back to the car. When he started his speech, I immediately told him, Devin, if I was in your position, I would have done the same thing, because when it comes to cold, I am also a wimp. So I made that connection in the introduction of the speech. Remember, only 20 seconds, not too much, because we have to focus on the body. And then finally is the summary. Let's go with what happens in the body. So introduction, how did the speech affected you? 20 seconds, 2 sentences. In the body, I will share the 2 things the speaker did effectively. The 2 things the speaker did effectively. And in the next section, 2 things the speaker can do to make their speech more effective. The choice of words is very important. Don't use the word improvement. I feel it has a negative connotation. And then I follow it with the best thing about the speech. In the symbols, I told you, right, I have a star sign. That's where it comes, the best thing about the speech. And then I do the summary. But when I'm also summarizing, I will change the order. I'll summarize the things the speaker could do to make their speech more effective first, followed by the 2 things the speaker did effectively, and then the best thing about the speech. Any questions regarding the structure of the evaluation?
Abhijeet, I have a question. Why do you think it's more effective to start from the things they can do better instead of first talk about they did well?
No, what I'm saying is when I'm summarizing. So in the body, I talk about 2 things the speaker did effectively. Okay. The next thing I talk about, 2 things the speaker can do to make their speech more effective. Then the best thing about the speech. But when I'm summarizing, I change the order. I talk about, when I'm summarizing, this is the final summary. I talk about 2 things the speaker can do to make their speech more effective. And then I talk about 2 things speaker did effectively and the best thing about the speech. And the reason why is I want to end on a positive note. That is the reason I change the order when I'm doing the summary. I want to end on a positive note. My goal is to motivate the speaker.
I have
Does
a
that make
question.
sense, Chong? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
When it comes to summary, how many seconds should it be? Is there anything like that?
So I would suggest like less than 30 seconds. After you pass the yellow sign, between 240, I want you to start summarizing. And you just have to use 2 or 3 words while summarizing, not a complete sentence, because you don't have much time left.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah. When we're giving in Toastmasters, giving the speech evaluation, we have 2 different targets. One is the speaker. You want to give him feedback, but you're also giving a speech, so you should not forget the rest of the audience. Where do you make the balance?
So Ronald, the one thing I've learned is I only talk to the speaker. This is what I learned from my mentors. I'll focus completely on the speaker. I know it's a speech. I mean, it's like I know the audience is also there, but mostly I'm directly talking to the speaker when I'm giving the speech. Yeah, this is what I follow.
Okay, thank
the
you.
way I will start is fellow Toastmasters and guests, and especially you, Ronald. Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
Abhijeet,
Yes.
can I say a point?
Sure, please.
Yeah. So to pertaining to Jaymol's question, right? Summarizing in 30 seconds. If you will most probably, many of you, when you're starting, you will find it tough to summarize within 30 seconds, because if you're talking about 2 improvements or how to make it more effective and then going to what they were effective, I think the other way of ending the speech would be just because you've already spoken about what they have to improve upon. So just end it with a one excellent point that the speaker had to end on a positive note. So that's just like one other way of ending.
Thank you, Shoba. Any other questions?
Kalpana here.
Yes.
How to connect the purpose and the evaluation speech? Where should we bring it?
Yes. So you can bring it in the two things when you're talking about the person did effectively. Like suppose if I'm giving understanding your communication style speech. And when I got that evaluation, I remember the evaluator said, it's like the way you incorporated your stories and your communication style, that was very effective. It really met your purpose as well as you made the speech interesting by telling the stories. See how I intervene the purpose of the speech with the storytelling aspect of it. That's what the feedback I got from my evaluator at that moment. Always look for the bigger picture. You know, if they're meeting the purpose, what they have done well to meet that purpose. Give that why. Any other question? Let's move on. What is the feedback? This I learned from Ryan Avery. I didn't know. I thought, oh, your vocabulary variety is good. I thought that is a feedback. But no, that is just an opinion because it does not have a why attached to it. A good feedback is something which has a why attached to it. Why the vocal variety was good? Because it helped me understand that there were two characters. The dialogue she used for two different voices it helped me to understand the story well because the two characters were completely different. So that's a why attached to it. But an ideal feedback has a why attached to it as well as the specific example. When you were doing that dialogue and having different voices for your mom and different voices for your kid, that helped me to really understand that speech or relate to that speech because I'm now giving that specific example in that speech. So remember, an ideal feedback has a why attached to it and also that specific example. Superlatives. I'm going to share two stories in superlatives. I have a friend, Renee. I remember she was giving an evaluation at Toast It Now, and I was a general evaluator. As she was giving the speech, I was noting down how many times she used the word amazing. She used the word 8 times. Amazing, 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 8 times. And I have my mentor, Solarzar. He says, when you use superlatives, it shows the laziness of the usage of the English language. Because amazing does not give any help to the speaker. You need to attach a why you felt it was amazing. So remember, don't just use superlatives. Add that why. In another sense, avoid superlatives if you can. Talk about what was effective about it and why it was effective, adding that example. So avoid superlatives if you can. Rambling. You only have 3 minutes plus a 30-second grace period. Avoid rambling. Like I had my friend Dhruv, I was a test speaker and he gave one of the best evaluations. I really liked it. But in one point, it took a really long time to elaborate. And because of that, he ran out of time. So try not to ramble during your evaluation. This I recently added. We all have heard the speech. So you don't need to repeat the speech. We all know the speech. We only need to know what things the speaker did effectively and what things the speaker could do to make the speech more effective. No need to regurgitate the speech. Avoid regurgitating the speech. Any questions so far? The best way to learn about evaluations is practice, practice, practice. I remember when I started my evaluations journey back in 2019, I was terrified of it. My first evaluation was only 1 minute, 30 seconds. I was like, oh my goodness. But practicing, I just decided to be an evaluator every week, week after week, week after week. And after I've done 150, 200 evaluations, then I got a hang of it. So it's just keep on practicing, 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 practicing.
Abhijeet,
Yes.
I have a question.
Mhm.
See, I'm a new Toastmaster. I've just given my icebreaker. I don't know whether I'm eligible to evaluate or not now.
Okay.
But for my first evaluation or first few evaluations, how do I start it?
Yes. So what I would suggest is whenever you hear, like today you guys had icebreakers. So whenever someone is giving a speech, take a note paper, write down 2 or 3 things the speaker did effectively, and write down 2 or 3 things speaker could do to make their speech more effective. Start listening, because it's all about listening, listening, listening. Train yourself. Evaluation is like training yourself to be a listener. So whenever someone is giving a speech, take your note. It's like, oh, this is the thing the speaker did effectively. This is the thing, because once you start that practice, then you get trained slowly and steadily. And when you have time to give an evaluation, you have already trained yourself. So listen,
What should be the
listen, listen.
line I should start with? Like,
Huh?
you know, how should I start it? As in, speech I know, but evaluation. For example, if you have to give an evaluation, how do you start? Just give me the first liner. Like,
Okay,
that's what I want.
so also when I'm giving the evaluation, I will start with how the speech affected you. But I think next few slides will explain you more. Okay, this will help you a lot. After this 12 slides, I want to come back to you and ask you this question. I want to understand, I think you will get the answer. Now I'm going to talk about what we are going to evaluate. What are we going to evaluate? I'm going to give you only a small list. Okay. These are the some things which we evaluate. The first one is vocal variety. How was the vocal variety? What is vocal variety? Pausing, rate, loudness, enunciation. So these are the things which are included in the vocal variety. This is something which we can look at in their speeches. So vocal variety. Any questions regarding vocal variety? Gestures, body language. Body language. Was the speaker just, means he was not using any body language, or was he using some kind of body language that was effective? Another thing is, if someone hasn't practiced their speech very well, sometimes their gestures are very robotic. So those are some things which you can point it out. Some people who have really rehearsed and practiced, their gestures become natural and they become very effective. So gestures is one of the things which we can evaluate the speaker on. Role play or a dialogue, having a dialogue. Dialogue can be very effective in the speech. If the speaker has done it, you can point that out. Like the dialogue was so effective, because when you're having a dialogue, you can share a lot of information in very small amount of time. So dialogue can be very effective in the speech. And if the speaker has done it, you can point it out, or you can also say, if you had the dialogue between these two people, it would make it more effective. Audience awareness. Sometimes when I'm a beginner speaker, I'm more just worried about my speech. What is my next line? I'm not worried about the audience, because I'm afraid that if I forget, what will happen? So I'm like completely frozen. So that, as the speaker speaks very often, they start developing the audience awareness. Is the audience really relating to what they are saying? Like when I see some speakers giving the workshop, they are scanning all the people. They are seeing their reactions. So that is audience awareness. Audience awareness comes with more practice, and you can point that out to the speaker. If something was very effectively done, and you saw that they had the audience awareness, you can point that out. Props. Having a prop can be very effective. Like one of the speeches I gave, I had a ruler because my teacher was slapping my hand. And that was very effective because I wanted to transport the audience to that scene. So props can be very effective. In another speech which I saw, the speaker was using so many props. He was always moving and taking the props. It can detract you from the speech. So props is another thing you can evaluate for. Clarity. Are you able to understand what they're saying? How was the clarity? Did you get something out of it? That is something you can point it out. How was the clarity of the speech? What they said made it clear for you, or was it confusing? You can evaluate the speaker based on this. Pauses. Pauses can be very effective, very, very effective. But for a new speaker to have pauses, it's very hard. When I was a new speaker, I used to speak at very fast rate. Pauses was not something in my, I was not having any pauses. So pauses is something you can evaluate the speaker for, and make sure that pauses can make a big difference in the speech because it gives the time to the audience to understand what is happening or assimilate what has just been said. So this is another way to evaluate. First and last line. This is called as bookending. Some speakers, they connect their first line of the speech with the last line of the speech, and that bookending is very effective. So you can point that out. I gave a speech, I remember I was the test speaker, and immediately my evaluator pointed it out. It's like, oh, I did not connect my first and last line because the starting story was different, the ending story was different. So try to connect that, make a big circle. Preparation. As I told you in the starting, like my fellow Toastmaster I was evaluating, he was not prepared. So you can point that out. You can say that, oh, if you prepare this speech more, you would be able to get rid of this unwanted pauses. So I'm pointing it out, but I'm also saying it in a very empathetic way. Content. Content is like 55% of your speech it's like for the international speech contest, it weighs 55%. How is the content? Is it rich? Does it connect with you? Does it have that emotional connection with you? That is something you can point it out. Like yesterday, one of my friends gave a speech. It didn't connect with me emotionally. So I told her, speech is good, but it didn't connect with me as her previous speech was. So content. Comfort. If the speaker is new, their comfort level is a little bit lower. But as they start practicing, the comfort level increases. That is something you can point it out. Call to action. Sometimes some speakers end their speech with a call to action. Was it effective? Was it not? Or if someone's speech does not have a call to action, do you think having a call to action can make their speech more effective? We can point that out. So these are some of the categories, okay, which we can evaluate. But one thing I want to tell you is if you are assigned as an evaluator, make sure you get the evaluation form 2 days before. When you get the evaluation form, read the purpose of the speech and also review the third page, because third page will have all the different criteria that you are evaluating the speech for. So always study your evaluation form. Make sure you get the evaluation form from the speaker 2 days before. It's the speaker's duty to send the evaluation form. So these are the things which we can evaluate. This is not a complete list. I just wanted to give you a sample. Did this answer your question? What we are evaluating?
had a question, Abhijeet.
Yes.
So when it comes to pauses, there's like unwanted pauses, the wanted pauses, and long pause, short pause. I was just wondering what's the right pause and how many seconds it is, and when do you pause in a speech?
It's all related. It depends upon you. See, the speech is how it affects you, right? I will give you an example. Press Vasil in his world champion speech, he had a 7-second pause. That's unheard of. 7 seconds. Normally people will pause 1 to 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds, but 7 seconds. It depends upon the speaker to speaker, how it impacts you. Look, it's like how is it affecting you? Connect with your feelings. That is most important. You will know. You will know what is happening. Is it making a difference? Immediately when I hear a speech, I know what is happening. It's like, no, yes. So look for it. Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
What about eye contact? Eye contact is
Yes.
also very important and very different
Yes.
if you're on a stage or for a camera.
Yes. You need to point that out. So that's why I said this is not a comprehensive list. This is just a sample. Eye contact is very important because if I just look at my slides, you will not feel connected with me. I'm just looking at the camera. My slides, I know them by heart. So eye contact is very important. Totally agree.
Yes,
with
because in the room you look at the people directly, but
Yes.
if you look on the screen, probably you're not looking at the camera.
Yes.
And they don't feel connected.
Yep. Very, very true. And also when you're on the stage, you need to scan the audience. You cannot just have one section. You have to keep on scanning. After 3 seconds, move on. Keep on moving.
Correct.
So these are the 3 things I want you to remember. Radical candor or compassionate candor. Make sure you are in that quadrant where you're challenging them directly in a compassionate and caring way. Use the magic of I statements. I saw, I felt, I heard. Always begin your sentence with that I. And remember, feedback, ideal feedback has a why attached to it with a specific example. Questions?
You talked about radical candor.
Yes.
Apart from emotions, do you think there's something that we should not step on or something that you should not make comment upon? What a speaker or speech?
I'm thinking. So one thing I want to tell you is if you share your feelings, you are on your side of the boundary. So there is nothing like you cannot comment on anything. When you share how you felt, it's different. Okay. So when you're sharing your feelings, they are not going to contradict it. So I would say you can share anything. You can share how you felt precisely. That is okay. And always attach a why to it.
Sorry. Can I add something to that?
Sure. Yeah.
So to the question, is it just emotions, right? So let's say you are giving feedback on the content. I think it would be good to remember you don't want to one up the speaker. The content of the speech is still from the speaker, what he or she wants to speak. As an evaluator, you are just evaluating the content of what they have spoken. But you cannot say, okay, your content could have been something else. So that's one more thing to remember with regards to content. I think that would be
very, very true. Like I was evaluating a speech and it was about video games, and I have no connection with video games, and it was very hard for me to evaluate that speech because And I could not say to him, oh, your content was. So remember, be compassionate and always listen what things you're trying to help that speaker out.
Thank you, Abhijeet. Susan, you have a question?
Yes, with regards to things you should avoid speaking about, is you don't tell somebody that they are wrong and debate the actual content. I don't agree with your opinion, because that's not what this is about. And you don't talk about the person. You do not attack them. The third thing that you need to remember is when you offer your feedback, don't talk about something they can't change. It has to be something they can take action on, not something that they can't. For instance, there was a speaker, very good speaker, that had a different accent. And we all know that if we do not speak with the same accent, it is more difficult for us to hear. It's not that the accent is wrong, it's that they may need to speak a little slower so that I can digest or hear better. It's my limitation, not theirs.
Very well said, Susan. One more thing I wanted to add. If someone is giving an icebreaker, I don't try to give them way too many things, how they can improve their speech. I will just give them one way to make their speech more effective. So meet the speaker at their level. Any other questions?
I had a question. How do I
Yes.
take this? Evaluation is a great skill to have because it's going to help me to listen better and share what my feedback is about that speech. Now, how can I use this at workplace?
Same thing, what things they are doing effectively. If you're working with your colleague, it's like, okay, oh yeah, I really enjoy your designs, but can we work on the schedule a little bit? Because if it keeps on moving, it becomes very tough to give the product on time. How can we do that? So always start with what things they are doing well or effectively, because there is, sometimes I had to train myself. Okay, what are they doing effectively? There is always something they are doing effectively. We need to focus a lot of attention on that. Sometimes it was easy to focus on what they can do to make their speech more effective. But sometimes this is the other side, which me and Ravi, one of my fellow Toastmasters, we like, okay, we need to ace this. We need to just look at this side. Don't worry about this side.
Thank you, Jaymol. I had the same question. You had it. Other question I have is, for a nice speaker speech, what do you think that we need to consider apart from being gentle on the feedback?
The best thing is when someone is giving an icebreaker, you get a chance to learn about them. And that's such a gift. I love icebreakers because that's when we get to know the person. Focus more on that. And just give them one thing, what they can do. Make it simple, make it easier for them so that they can, if they want to give that speech again, they can incorporate that very easily. Give them how to incorporate it. Tell them. Yes, go ahead.
I have a related question. What if the speaker is experienced re-giving icebreakers? Could we go a little bit in depth?
Yes. So then you can go one step further. Okay, now they have worked on their process. You can talk about, okay, they can use depending upon what their story needs. If they have a couple of stories or 3 stories, they can use the stage, with anchor points in their story. So there are so many different ways we can give feedback. You don't have to give the same feedback again and again.
What do you suggest for people who are going to evaluate an accomplished speaker?
One thing I'll tell you, it doesn't matter who has an accomplished. I'm going to say this, but I was looking at a semi-final speech and it's like, This speech, she's talking more about her mom rather than her experience. That didn't connect with me. So if I have to give a feedback to that person, I would have said, I really enjoyed your mom's story, but I wanted to hear more about your story, your journey. So she's a very accomplished speaker, but I'm still giving her feedback how I felt. And by the way, I will stop myself. I know the speaker's name. I was just discussing that about that speaker. It's like, oh, very interesting.
That is getting on important. One last question before
Yes.
we move to the breakout room.
Yes.
Anyone?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Kalpana,
Sorry,
go ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Abhijeet, I'm so sorry. You know that discussion on change and call for action. I
Yes.
like that example. Can you give another example for change? You know, we should not say something that is to be changed, but we should say something that requires call for action. So just give me one simple example for that.
Okay. Let me think. So I'll give you an example for change because it happened recently to me. I gave a speech where I had 3 stories, but then I concluded it so fast that the conclusion did not have very much meat into that. So my evaluator immediately pointed it out that you need to develop that conclusion because that's where your learnings are. And what he said really resonated with me. He said, your learnings are very helpful for us to learn. If you don't share how you learned about it, then we will not learn about it. So share your learnings. Walk us through your thought process. How did you end up learning, or how did you end up concluding that? Like I concluded my speech with 3 things. I realized 3 things. The 3 things were acceptance, acknowledgement, acceptance, and the last thing was boundaries. Those were my 3 things, but I never explained them in detail. So the evaluator immediately pointed it out. Okay, how can we, if you can elaborate on it, that will be really helpful for us to learn from it. So that is the example of a change. For our call to action, it depends upon, like I had this one story I gave, one speech I gave. My speech title was Say Yes. So I entered the speech like this. I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to say one yes today. One yes might change your life. So that was an example where I had the call to action in my speech.
Thank you very much, Abhijeet,
Thank
for
you.
giving a session and also answering all the questions that we have.
Yes.
Please accept this token of appreciation from my two Toastmasters. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's time to go to breakout room. You all have access to breakout room. Please move on, and then we can go with the next section on the speech getting on point.